be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Harry Potter Meets Simpsons? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Rick89 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. They were greeted by the sight of a tall, black-haired witch named Professor McGonagall, who to Bart seemed even more uptight than Principal Skinner. She'll be fun to prank, Bart thought. The first years followed her through the entrance hall and across the flagged stone floor, eventually finding themselves in a small, empty, crowded chamber. Bart initially felt uncomfortable but eventually figured that it was the perfect opportunity to let rip a silent fart. The waving of hands around him made him chuckle inwardly. Silent but deadly, he thought. Professor McGonagall then went and rambled about the start-of-term banquet, the sorting ceremony and the 4 houses. Bart largely zoned out during this speech because Headmaster Dumbledore had already discussed the various houses with him. After his discussion with Gemma on the train, he already knew that he wanted to be a Slytherin. However, he heard Harry behind him, asking someone how they were sorted into houses. "Oh, I heard that they throw you into a gauntlet and you're kicked and punched a lot by a bunch of other students as you go through. At the end of the gauntlet, the injuries that you have determines what house you're sorted into," Bart lied casually, turning to Harry as he did so. Harry's eyes bugged out like saucers upon hearing this, but he was somewhat reassured by Bart's wink. Some of the other students murmured worriedly, however, much to Bart's amusement. However, many students were startled out of their thoughts by the arrival of several ghosts. The sight of these ghosts apparently scared many people, but not Bart. Ghosts? Cool, he thought, not seeing any at Ilvermorny. One of the ghosts, a supposed friar, told them that he hoped to see them in Hufflepuff, to which Bart had to keep himself from laughing hysterically. At that point Professor McGonagall returned and led the students out of the chamber in a line into the Great Hall. Many of the students appeared fascinated by the sights and sounds of the Great Hall, but Bart was indifferent, having seen a similar spectacle at Ilvermorny. He heard Hermione say something about the sky being bewitched to resemble the ceiling outside, to which he thought, "Nobody cares, you Lisa wannabe." Bart then sighted a 4-legged stool which had a battered old wizard's hat on top of it. To his surprise, the hat then started singing. After the end of its song, the hall burst into applause, but Bart was mortified beyond belief. Okay, that was very disturbing, he thought, being reminded of that time when he heard about Ned Flanders singing in falsetto in front of the entire church congregation. Professor McGonagall then held out a roll of parchment and called out, "Abbot, Hannah," who was sorted into Hufflepuff. Bart then sniggered when he heard the name, Bones, Susan, and thought, boners. To Bart's relief, Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor. Oh well, at least I don't have to put up with her crapping on about random things that no one cares about, he thought. However, he was far more amused when Draco was sorted into Slytherin with his 2 boyfriends. "See you at ground zero, you blonde bee," he thought. The name, Potter, Harry, shook him out of his reverie and he watched Harry dawdle up to the stool with fascination. After a few minutes, the hat cried out, "Gryffindor," to which Bart slapped himself in annoyance. He liked Harry's unassuming nature and he would like to have had him around as a partner in crime. However, deep down he wasn't surprised, not after Harry had previously admitted to him that he didn't want to be sorted into the same house as Draco. Before too long, the name, Simpson, Bartholomew, was called out. He strode up to the stool, savoring the pointed glares of all of the Hogwarts teaching staff, bar the smiling headmaster and a man wearing a turban, as he did so. With a scowl, Professor McGonagall placed the sorting hat onto Bart's head. "Ah, Mr. Simpson. You're the first-year American to be sorted by me for as long as I can remember. You are quite the tricky customer to sort, I must say. Sure, you're no Hufflepuff, but your poor academic record belies your intelligence, wit and creativity. You would be a better Ravenclaw than it would appear at first glance. However, I do not think that is your ideal house. In truth, you would be almost perfect for Gryffindor. You are brave, daring, courageous and athletic. However, you are not very chivalrous. That leaves Slytherin. Yes, you're the quintessential Slytherin, I think. You execute your pranks with cunning, resourcefulness and an utter disregard for the rules. I can also feel your ambition to be great. You wanted to be the Chief Justice of the Muggle Supreme Court of the United States before learning you were a wizard, didn't you? Yes, sir, Bart said, astonished that the hat even knew that. I thought as much. Additionally, like a certain wizard who came here many moons ago, you well and truly have the potential to be great, and I think that Slytherin will definitely help you on your way to greatness, so it had better be Slytherin, the hat concluded with a yell. However, unlike the claps and cheers which greeted every other student sorting into their respective house, Bart's sorting was met with utter silence, such that you could hear a pin drop. We can't have Simpson in Slytherin, he's a filthy mudblood. Draco eventually yelled, his boiling anger and prejudice towards the spiky-haired Muggleborn giving forth an ugly outburst. Indeed, such outbursts all too often overcame whatever Slytherin subtlety the blonde might have had. First he wrecks my chance to befriend Harry Potter, now he's in the same house as me. That sorting hat must have been confounded. How in Merlin's name could this have happened otherwise? I'll have to write to my parents about this. He cannot be in my house. While he's still here, I'll make his life so miserable that he'll wish he had never been born. Draco's slur was received by a stony stare from Gemma, murmurs of agreement and embarrassed looks from other Slytherin members, and scandalized looks and whispering from students from the other three houses. Bart looked over to the Gryffindor table, where he saw Harry fix Draco with a murderous glare and Hermione gaze down at her shoes. Bart then surveyed the teaching staff, who themselves looked quite shocked at Draco's outburst. They might not have looked forward to teaching Bart, but calling someone a mudblood in public was definitely not socially acceptable. After a few minutes, Headmaster Dumbledore nodded and smiled at Bart, subtly gesturing with his hand towards the Slytherin table. The boy then turned towards Slytherin and caught Gemma's imperceptible nod and smile. With that, Bart walked to the Slytherin table. However, he discovered that none of the first years wanted him to sit with them. Draco in particular fixed him with a scowl, to which Bart just smirked. The other first years don't want me to sit next to them, no problemo, I'll just get one of the older students to make room for me. However, none of the older students were any more willing to make room for him than the first-year students were. Gemma watched this whole scene with anger and disgust. What happened to house unity in the face of other houses? What happened to looking after your own, Muggleborn or not? When did Slytherin become a hive for BLD-obsessed fanatics? When did our house decline to the point that mediocrities like Malfoy are actually taken seriously? She thought. Gemma's family, while pure-blooded, neither supported pure BLD fanaticism nor fought on Lord Voldemort's side during the last Wizarding War like many of her housemates' families did. Instead, they pursued a policy of what Muggle foreign policy experts might term Finlandisation, bowing to Voldemort's side while not mooning Headmaster Dumbledore's. They supplied Voldemort's side with free potion ingredients from her mother's apothecary while selling Headmaster Dumbledore's side information about the movements of Voldemort's Death Eaters. They bought this information from the less loyal Death Eaters, for whom making a buck was more important than Voldemort's cause. Unfortunately, they were slowly losing money from the practice before the war came to an abrupt end. She, like many Slytherins, valued her family and so was determined not to allow her family to fall into that situation again. In her mind, that could only be achieved not only by decimating the Death Eater ranks, but also by subjugating her family's pro-Dumbledore opponents, thus minimizing the aging wizard's influence on their family and thus making it easier for them to influence Britain's wizarding world. To this end, she considered Bart to be the perfect weapon to use against her opponents, a young, malleable, once-in-a-generation talent who happened to be attracted to her. What did his BLD status matter when he displayed such ability? Speaking of Bart, he saw him advance towards her, apparently having not found a seat. She quickly ordered the boy next to her to move down and make room for Bart, after which she invitingly smiled at Bart and patted the space next to her. Bart obliged her, smiling gratefully. "Thanks, Gemma." "No problem, Bart." What Malfoy did was violate one of Slytherin's unspoken rules, always display unity in front of other houses. I couldn't punish him there and then because I would be violating that rule too, but once we're in the dungeons, I'll give him detention for the next week for that little stunt. No student deserves to be publicly humiliated like that, not even a Gryffindor, Gemma joked. "So, what did you do to rub him up the wrong way?" "He behaved like you pissed in his chips," she observed. "Well, I fought with him at MDM Malkin's in front of a boy who turned out to be Harry Potter," Bart explained. At that, Gemma laughed. "He's even more arrogant and stupid than I thought. Not only antagonizing a massive talent like yourself, but the boy who lived at the same time. He really knows how to pick his battles," Gemma sarcastically observed, deliberately stroking Bart's ego in the process. As she said this, she mused, "So, Lucius Malfoy's weak link is apparently his son. He should be easier to take down than I thought." "Yeah, nothing says cunning and resourceful quite like pissing off important, powerful people," came Bart's rejoinder. "I agree. Slytherin is meant to stand for cunning, resourcefulness, drive, ambition and not being afraid to break the rules, but I realize now that over the years it's just become a hive of some and bigotry. Most of my fellow students are either thugs, like Malfoy's friends Crabbe and Goyle, or are comfortable coasting on their family name, rather than showing genuine ambition and trying to become great and change history, like you or me," Gemma bitterly replied. Bart nodded at this, after which point the sorting ended and Headmaster Dumbledore uttered the words, "blubber," and "nitwit." "He's not referring to Drano acting like a blubbering nitwit, is he?" Bart snarked, to which Gemma laughed. After Bart said that, a sumptuous feast magically came into being. For him this feast equaled the one provided by Ilvermorny and he tucked in eagerly. Eventually the feast ended and Headmaster Dumbledore spoke, introducing the caretaker Filch. Filch, whom Bart privately nicknamed Filth, seemed about as friendly as groundskeeper Willie and Bart certainly looked forward to pranking him. The mage then announced the upcoming Quidditch trials, but Bart remembered how his last sojourn with a broom ended and found himself most uninterested. Finally, he informed the school that both the forest and the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side were out of bounds to anyone who didn't wish to endure a painful death. At this, Bart smirked and thought, whatever's in that corridor must be worth checking out. He then locked eyes with a laughing Harry over at the Gryffindor table and could immediately tell that he was thinking the same thing. To Bart's utter horror, Headmaster Dumbledore displayed his utter lack of signing chops as he butchered the already unmelodic school song, to which pretty much everyone except Bart joined in. "Ay caramba. I didn't think it was possible, but that both sucked and blew," Bart thought. Mercifully for him though, that dreadful display ended and the headmaster told everybody to go to bed. "Bart, follow me. I'm leading you and the rest of the Furs Ties to Slytherin's common room," Gemma instructed before she teamed up with a tall, dark-haired male prefect and went to collect the rest of the first years. "Yes'm," came Bart's lengthy response before following her. Eventually, the first years all came together and proceeded to the common room, with Bart making sure to walk by Gemma's side in case Draco or another first year tried to curse him from behind. Sure enough, he felt the heat of Draco's glare on his back but no attacks came as they walked through some labyrinthine passages and stopped at a bare, damp stone wall. "Veritaserum," Gemma uttered as a stone door concealed within the wall slipped open. Looking around, Bart did see some similarities with Thunderbird's common room, as it also had a fireplace alongside several sofas and tables being featured in the middle of the room. However, this common room was more of an elaborate dungeon, replete with stone walls and a greenish hue caused by overhanging lamps, along with darker furniture. Already having seen a common room, Bart wasn't quite as impressed by seeing another. After giving the first years a brief congratulatory speech for being sorted into Slytherin, Gemma pointed out that the boys' and girls' dormitories could be found beyond the doors on each side of the room. The male prefect then left and she proceeded to follow, before Draco blurted out, "The mudblood Simpson isn't sleeping with us. He doesn't even belong in Slytherin," to which his boyfriends and another black-haired girl with hair in a bob murmured agreement while the other children said nothing, obviously not wishing to antagonize Draco. Gemma turned around and gave Draco a dangerous smile. He had just given her the perfect opportunity to double his detention. "Come with me, Malfoy. The rest of you, stay where you are," she ordered, to which Draco reluctantly complied as they both left the dungeon. Although she didn't say as such, Bart knew there would be hell to pay if the other first years attacked him. Nonetheless, feeling rather paranoid, Bart turned and stared the other first years down, like a gunslinger in the Wild West. He knew, despite his prodigious talent, that he couldn't take them all out if they attacked him. No, he would have to disappear by combining the disillusionment and silencing charms like he had so many times before. As Bart was preparing to do this, a pretty brunette with shoulder-length wavy hair and hazel eyes watched him with interest. Simpson obviously doesn't trust us. It looks like he'll do something at any moment. Run off or maybe even attack us. Who knows? I'd better start talking to him, just so nothing bad happens. I'm a half BLD, so nobody here really cares if I talk to a Muggleborn, since the purebloods think I'm lower than them anyway. Simpson. We don't have to be enemies. It's just that Draco's father is a very dangerous man who can harm our families and so we're all afraid of annoying his son, the brunette explained. Wow, that came out of nowhere, Bart thought, but his response was nonetheless terse. Well, that hasn't stopped me from fighting him. Simpson, you're the first Muggleborn to be sorted into his house for a very long time and you don't even sound like you're from Britain, the girl began. That's because I'm not. Ignoring him, the girl continued, listen, the Malfoys are very wealthy and so hold a great deal of power within the British Ministry of Magic and within Hogwarts. Draco's father is very close to the Minister of Magic and so influences him greatly. He's also on Hogwarts' Board of Governors. Crossing Draco is not a good idea for that reason, because he'll go running to his father, who can use his influence to make our lives and those of our families very difficult. Finally, Bart understood why these kids were reluctant to openly associate with him. Draco's family couldn't easily harm Bart or his family due to their great distance from magical Britain, but they could certainly harm these children and their families. My name is Tracy Davis, by the way. It's good to finally talk to you, and congratulations on being sorted into Slytherin, she said, holding out a slender, delicate, manicured hand, which Bart took. One by one, the other kids came up and shook his hand, except for Draco's boyfriends, Bob Girl, as Bart nicknamed her, and a black boy who disdainfully turned his back on the rest of his housemates. His personality obviously matches his skin color, Bart thought. First, there was a pretty girl with long blonde hair, high cheekbones and sapphire blue eyes, who introduced herself as Daphne Greengrass. There was then a weedy, vaguely rat-faced boy with dark hair and eyes named Theodore Knott, followed by a heavy-set girl with brown eyes named Millicent Bulstrode, and finally a brown-eyed girl with long brown hair who introduced herself as Rachel Runcorn. Eventually, Gemma returned without Draco and instructed all the first-year students, except Bart, to go to their dormitories. Soon enough, the two were alone. What happened to Dranny? Bart asked. Gemma laughed before explaining, well, I told naughty little Draco that he had 2 weeks detention and that he had to start serving the detention tonight. Let's just say that Draco will be having a rather late night. At this, she gave Bart an intimidating grin. Bart chuckled before Gemma walked him down the stairs to the boys' dormitory. By the way, Bart, there are 2 spells I want you to learn, Protego Duo and Protego Totalum. The first one shields you from physical and magical attacks, of which I think you'll receive many in Slytherin. The second one protects an area for a long PRD of time. You'll need to cast that one over your bed every night. Don't think that Draco won't try and attack you in your sleep. "I'll show you how it's done the first time, just get into bed and then watch me," she instructed as they entered Bart's dormitory, with every other student apparently having already fallen asleep, seeing as how their velvet green curtains were drawn closed. After Bart entered the large, four-poster bed on the far left, which had a trunk labeled "Simpson" at its foot, Gemma covered the bed in a translucent shield by saying the relevant incantation while flicking her wand. "Cool," Bart replied, to which Gemma smiled at him, bade him good night and strode out of the dorm. Even the energetic Bart suddenly found himself rather worn down by the day's events, and so, without even really taking in his surroundings or thinking about Balthazar, he dropped off into the land of slumber. Bart woke the next morning and turned towards the other students. Much to his relief, Draco, Crabbe and Goyle were on the other side of the room. As he was sublimely indifferent as to whether or not he was late to class, Bart had planned on disillusioning himself and waiting for his housemates to leave the dormitory. Unfortunately, before he could do so, an already dressed Draco turned and saw Bart looking in his direction. "Hey look, the mudblood's awake," Draco sneered. The rest of his classmates went about their business while he did so, pretending that both Bart and Draco didn't exist. Seeing that the shield charm over his bed was still active, Bart hoped to try and provoke Draco into cursing him. To this end, Bart politely replied, "Good morning to you too, my dear Draco. I heard you had a pretty late night. Did you have a good time?" Draco snarled at this but nonetheless didn't take the bait, venomously replying, "I'll have an even better one knocking you down a peg, mudblood. What, with your lack of magical ability? I bet that you couldn't curse me even if I gave you a free shot. Speaking of which, why don't I give you one right now?" Bart questioned as he held his hands up, revealing that he was wandless. He saw that Draco was mulling over the possibility, so Bart decided that the blonde needed just one more push. "Come on. You know you want dash." While Bart was talking, Draco yelled, "Locomotor mortis," shooting a nasty-looking purple curse in Bart's direction. Bart simply smirked as the curse hit the shield and bounced back at Draco. Draco managed to dodge it, but unfortunately Goyle, who had just come out of the bathroom behind him wearing a towel, was not so lucky. After being hit by the curse, Goyle's legs locked and his towel dropped, leaving him stark naked while hopping around the room with his legs together. At this, the room laughed uproariously, leaving Draco to glare at Bart as he realized that he had been tricked. "You win this round, Simpson, but the war isn't over." Draco snarled as he freed Goyle from the bind using a counter curse and then stormed out, with Goyle in tow and Crabbe scampering behind them. After they left, Theo nodded at Bart. "Nice work, Simpson," he complimented. "What, you think that's good, dude? I've got a lot more tricks up my sleeve," Bart bragged as, proving his point, he disillusioned and silenced himself, causing Theo to gape in shock. Eventually, not seeing Bart move, the other boy shook his head, finished dressing and walked out, as the black boy, whose surname was apparently Zabini, quickly followed. Bart sauntered into the shower and had been in there for some time when suddenly the door unlocked and opened. Before Bart could react, a hand reached in to grab his arm and drag him bodily out of the shower. Much to Bart's horror, the person who dragged him out of the shower was none other than Gemma. Her usually pretty face was contorted into rage, and at that moment, she scared Bart more than Sideshow Bob or Dr. Demento did. "What the hell have you been doing? Everyone else is in the hall eating breakfast except you. I searched for you in the halls and the common room," Gemma hissed. Bart was tempted to tell her to eat his shorts, but at the moment she looked like she wanted to try and turn him into a slug. Not wanting to risk that, Bart sheepishly apologized. "You want to be great, don't you, Bart?" Gemma asked, using one of her delicate, slender fingers to lift Bart's head up so he made eye contact with her. "Yes'm," Bart admitted. "Well, then tell me. How do you expect to be a great wizard if you're so late to class that you don't get to learn anything new about magic? Do you really want the likes of Malfoy to become a better wizard than you, just because he attended class and you didn't?" As Gemma expected, Bart looked revolted at the idea of Draco becoming a better wizard than him. His eyes narrowed in determination. "I thought so. Now get dressed, she commanded, levitating his clothes into his arms with her wand. Not wanting to cross her any further, Bart quickly complied, opened the door and ran up the stairs to the common room, with Gemma smirking as she followed. Based on last night's events, she guessed that none of her fellow housemates would let Bart sit with them and so forced another housemate to move over, to which the boy glared but nonetheless reluctantly complied. As Bart sat down, Balthazar flew in and perched himself on his shoulder. At witnessing this, Gemma laughed. "Looks like your owl finds your shoulder a good place to perch, Bart," she remarked. "Yeah, he does that. Hopefully he doesn't poop down the back of my robes," Bart responded. Balthazar then apparently decided to troll Bart by doing exactly that. Before he knew it, Bart felt something wet drop down the back of his robes. Balthazar. He as Gemma saw the white streak and laughed before silently cleaning it. After cleaning his robes, she discussed various things with Bart, including the annoying poltergeist peeves and the areas where he typically inhabited so Bart could avoid him, before warning him about Filch's cat Mrs. Norris, who quickly brought Filch to wherever she last saw a student breaking a rule. This conversation was cut short when she saw the rest of the hall start to leave for classes and so told Bart to finish his food. "But I don't even have a schedule. How the hell do I know where I'm going to go?" Bart querulously inquired. Just as he uttered that last syllable, something papery materialized in his robe pocket. Lo and behold, it was a class schedule. Bart looked at Gemma with wonderment. She in response gave him a little smile and replied cryptically, "Magic, my dear Mr. Simpson. The schedule materializes when it's time to head to your first class." "Of course, Miss Farley," Bart said in a mock British accent, playing along with Gemma's mock formality. She then led him to the correct classroom, which was on the 3rd floor, before bidding him farewell. As it transpired, much like in Ilvermorny, his first class was Charms, with the diminutive Professor Flitwick. "Now class, why don't we start our lesson by learning how to perform a levitation charm?" the overly excitable dwarf asked. After outlining some theory regarding the charm, which caused Bart to tap his foot in impatience as he waited for the opportunity to show off in front of his classmates, he then asked the class to lift their feather up using their wands and utter an incantation which Bart couldn't have been bothered learning. "Pfft, only rubes need a wand to lift things," Bart arrogantly thought to himself as he made a big spectacle of himself by extravagantly waving his arm, imitating a Nazi salute, towards the feather and lifting it far higher into the air than all the other feathers. This predictably caught Professor Flitwick's attention. "Mr. S. Simpson, are you lifting the feather in the air with just your arm?" the man asked in absolute astonishment. "Who says I need my arm or hand to lift things?" Bart cockily asked as he lowered his arm and kept the feather in place using the technique he had previously outlined to Gemma, by picturing the feather floating in his mind as he focused on it. Professor Flitwick and the rest of the class gaped in surprise. Bart enjoyed the attention he received greatly, particularly the murderous glare he received from Draco and Bob Girl for upstaging them, along with the expressions of stupefied shock from Draco's 2 boyfriends. "Eat my shorts, Dranny," he mouthed, strengthening Draco's glare further and making Bart chuckle. "T20 points to Slytherin, Mr. Simpson. I have to tell you that this is the finest display of the levitation charm I've ever seen from a first year," Professor Flitwick stuttered. "Oh well, what can I say? I just practice every day," Bart replied with false humility, hoping for the small man to heap more praise on him. He was not disappointed. Mere practice cannot allow a first year to do this. "You are a truly extraordinary talent and you may receive the best ever grades in charms if you apply yourself," Professor Flitwick gushed. At this, Bart shook his head with more faux modesty. In doing so, however, he failed to notice the looks Daphne and Tracy were giving each other, which only meant one thing: we need to talk about Simpson after class. Soon enough, the class ended, with Professor Flitwick telling Bart that it was a pleasure to have someone as gifted as he in their class. "Heh, first time any teacher has told me that." "Oh well, first time for everything," he thought as he strode out of the classroom and to his next lesson. He saw Draco and his posse up ahead and thought, "Good. If they're ahead of me then they can't attack me from behind," and strolled to the next class. He failed to notice that Daphne and Tracy were around the corner, watching him walk into the distance before following him. "Daph? Did you see what Simpson did? He lifted that feather and kept it in place without even using his hand," Tracy exclaimed. "Do you always need to commentate for the blind, Trace?" An irritated Daphne snarked, feeling most displeased at Bart for upstaging her very meritorious efforts in the charms class, wherein she was able to lift her feather with a wand faster than everybody else. She expected to be the best student in class and he had just endangered that expectation without even trying. "Oh come on, Daph, surely you enjoy the competition," Tracy joked. When Daphne scowled at her, she responded, "Okay, maybe you don't, but think about it. Simpson can help us undermine Malfoy's influence in Slytherin. Thanks to his father's influence in the wider wizarding world, he behaves as if he's the supreme snake and there is nothing we can do about it ourselves. I think that Simpson is gifted enough to do something, though. I mean, Malfoy has already called him a mudblood in front of everyone, so I don't think he'll think twice about helping us if we ask him." At this, Daphne nodded in agreement but noted, "Tracy, you know that I don't like Malfoy and I agree that Simpson could help us, but even talking to him is dangerous. Besides, I think that somebody in our house has already taken him under their wing." "Farley." Tracy frowned. "The fifth-year prefect? Why do you think that?" Daphne explained, "Trace, Farley has been the only Slytherin who has willingly let Simpson sit down next to them, twice now, in fact. Did you also see how close he was to Farley when we were walking to the common room?" Tracy nodded and pondered Daphne's questions before replying, "Wait a minute. I don't remember seeing Simpson on the train with the rest of the first years. Do you think that he was with Farley the entire time?" Daphne nodded to her half-BLD friend. "Yes, I do. It's odd that a prefect would invite a first year to sit next to them during the welcoming feast. She would only have done that if she knew Simpson already, and seeing as how he's an American Muggleborn, she couldn't have known him before the train ride. I think that he ran into her onto the train, showed her some of what he can do, and so she took him under his wing. I have no doubt that she wants to use his talents to get rid of her family's enemies." Tracy replied, "Yes, that would be a very Slytherin thing to do, use other people to achieve your own agenda." "Yes, it is. That nobody else in Slytherin wants to openly associate with Simpson makes it even easier for Farley to influence him, since in his mind she's the only one he can trust. Farley won't give up that influence over him without a fight. Besides, I've known Farley since I was a child, we attended many of the same pure BLD events. She was always a social climber, always using other people to further her status or her family's, because her family was not as wealthy or influential as many other pure BLD families. At these events, she was always talking to people who she thought could help her achieve better grades, or potioneers whom she thought might buy her family's products, or high-ranking officials within the ministry whom she thought could help secure her a position in the ministry when she graduated or help her father get a promotion. I've also heard that her family can be very ruthless if they don't get their way. Some time ago, they burnt down a rival apothecary that was taking business from them. They later bought out another apothecary, but there were stories about how the owners refused, and so the Farleys hired a group of mercenaries to invade their home, attack them and mentally manipulate them into signing the contract. At this, Tracy frowned and asked, "What do you want to do?" "Well, I don't think that the Farleys and the Malfoys like each other much. The Malfoys don't trust the Farleys because they never joined the Dark Lord, while the Farleys aren't BLD supremacists like the Malfoys. If they were, Farley would never have given Simpson the time of day. I think that Farley will get Simpson to take care of Malfoy for us at some point before she graduates. In that time, we should become friends with Simpson. When Farley graduates, she'll obviously be out of Hogwarts, and so we can convince Simpson to help us more than Farley, since we'll be his biggest allies in Slytherin House." Tracy smiled at Daphne's idea and asked, "So do you want to set up a secret meeting with Simpson?" "I'll give him the note, because I've already spoken to him, hopefully he knows that I have nothing against him. The note will have to be anonymous, just in case he goes and tells Farley. We'll also need to get him to sign a contract with a jinx on it, if he tries to talk about the meeting with anyone else, he'll become tongue-tied until he changes the subject. If he refuses to sign, we'll end the meeting, Daphne reasoned. Tracy smiled and nodded in appreciation of Daphne's superior intellect and magical ability. Bart then discovered that, like at Ilvermorny, transfiguration followed charms, only this time with Professor McGonagall rather than Professor Goldstein. Bart had nicknamed the black-haired witch, Mrs. Skinner, after hearing her lecture the class about fooling around. He planned on doing exactly that just to spite her, but before he did she transfigured a desk into a pig, and vice versa. Seeing an opportunity to upstage her and grab some attention, Bart, with his wand still in his pocket, transfigured an empty chair into a dog without uttering so much as a syllable. The middle-aged teacher was so shocked by this that the dog ran out of the room before she could even react. "How do you like that, Mrs. Skinner?" Bart remarked as the entire class gaped at him bar Daphne and Tracy, who were giving each other looks of vindication, and Draco, who looked positively infuriated. Professor McGonagall, for her part, scowled at his remark before her lips curled into a thin smile. "I like that quite a lot, Mr. Simpson," she even-handedly responded. 10 points to Slytherin for that brilliant display of transfiguration, she said, making Bart look quite smug, and 10 points from Slytherin for your cheek. "The name is also McGonagall, Mr. Simpson, not Skinner. If you call me that again I will give you a detention." Picturing Gemma turning him into a snail upon finding out that he got himself a detention in his first week, Bart gulped, to which the professor's smile broadened. Draco, his boyfriends, and Bob Girl also snickered. Bart, however, got to snicker in response when the rest of the class struggled to turn a matchstick into a needle, with only Daphne doing so. Losers, he thought. Unfortunately for Bart, a class that he found far less fascinating came in the form of herbology with the Ravenclaws, where a dumpy little witch called Professor Sprout had them study and take care of various plants and fungi. Having no interest in plants and fungi whatsoever, Bart went through the motions, only stopping to think to himself, Otto would enjoy finding out which plants he could smoke. However, the structure of the class, where students stood side by side in a row opposing the other house, allowed Tracy to slip a note into Bart's pocket at the end of class. Bart felt the note but before he could react Tracy had vanished into a crowd of Slytherin and Ravenclaw students. History held no particular interest for Bart, so after he took his seat in History of Magic, which Slytherin had with the Hufflepuffs, he read the note. Simpson. Please meet with my friend and me in an abandoned classroom on the 5th floor, 3rd door to the right of the stairwell after History of Magic. We would like to talk to you about some things, including surviving in Slytherin House. Regards. Your future friend. Bart read the note and became just a mite paranoid. He wondered who sent it. It couldn't have been a Ravenclaw because not only did he not actually know anyone from that house, but from what he could see Ravenclaws and Slytherins didn't exactly freely consort with each other in the halls. No, it had to be a Slytherin. The problem is that it could theoretically have been any of the first years who gave him that note, and that person might have been setting him up. Considering it further, by the looks of them Bart doubted that Draco's boyfriends were intelligent enough to set him up without Malfoy's input, whereas Zabini seemed to think himself too superior to interact with any of his classmates. That meant that the note must have come from Draco, Bobgirl, Theo, Tracy, Daphne, Millicent or Rachel. Although Tracy had told Bart that they didn't have to be enemies, he was not entirely sure where he stood with her or anybody else. Bart eventually decided that he would attend the meeting, but that if things looked dodgy he would quickly disappear. Before then though, he had sleep to catch up on, with Professor Binns droning providing the perfect backdrop. To this end, he cast a softening charm on his History of Magic textbook, used it as a pillow and quickly fell asleep. At the end of the class, he thought, well, that's the best nap I've ever had. That guy was more boring than Skinner after a lobotomy. Now to go to this secret meeting. To ensure that he wouldn't be followed, Bart turned into an abandoned classroom and cast his trusty disillusionment and silencing charms before moving out, being sure to have his wand out on the way. Upon discovering that he could not unlock the classroom door in question using his regular method, Bart whipped out his wand, chanted Alohomora Duo, and stepped in with unusual diffidence. When he did, he discovered that Tracy and Daphne were looking back at him, wands outstretched. They then put their wands away. "Don't worry, Simpson, we're not here to attack you. We just wanted to meet with you and discuss some things, since you are obviously disadvantaged in Slytherin due to being a Muggleborn," Daphne stated in her trademark posh, aristocratic accent, not wishing to reveal the true reasons for their overtures towards Bart. "Yeah, so I read." "No problemo, let's go," Bart insouciantly replied. "Not just yet, Simpson. We need you to sign this contract, in which you promise not to tell anyone about this meeting, verbally or in writing. If you do, you will become tongue-tied until you change the subject. If you refuse to sign this contract, this meeting will end immediately," Daphne informed him whilst wincing inwardly at his American Muggle slang, putting forth a sheet of paper. Bart thought for a minute. He didn't really want to go behind Gemma's back. On the other hand, these two girls could give him very useful advice about surviving in Slytherin and in the wider wizarding world. He did, however, decide that he should ask for more in exchange for signing the contract. "I'll only sign this contract if you two protect me from attacks from Draco and his cronies. You'll also teach me whatever spells you ladies happen to know," Bart calmly demanded. Daphne and Tracy looked at each other for a long while before Daphne sighed and replied, "Okay, Simpson. We'll have to be discreet about it though. We can't have Malfoy knowing we're looking out for you, it would be very bad for our standing in the house. We can only teach you widely known spells, not family spells because we are not allowed to." At this, Bart frowned, but nevertheless all three students amended and signed the contract. Bart began by asking, "So what do you girls have to say about surviving in Snakeland?" At this, Tracy, who was familiar with both American and British wizarding and Muggle culture due to her father, Julius, being a freelance cursebreaker, informed Bart that whenever he was in the Slytherin dungeons, he should avoid discussing his family in light of them being Muggles, something that Bart was all too happy to do. However, Bart was aghast to hear that many Slytherins were unfamiliar with most Muggle technology, such as dishwashers, dryers, telephones and even televisions. Should Bart discuss such contraptions, they might think that he was infecting Slytherin with filthy Muggle culture, and so he would receive more severe, corrective treatment accordingly. "How can I watch Krusty the Clown, and Itchy and Scratchy then?" Bart thought in horror. Tracy continued her spiel by suggesting to Bart, for much the same reasons as before, that he should stop using American Muggle slang when around other Slytherins, like cool, dude, awesome, no problemo, and man. Moreover, even if Slytherins weren't prejudiced against him to begin with, they wouldn't understand what he was talking about, thus impeding communication and the formation of alliances, which were very important in a house filled with brutality and prejudice. They also told Bart that terms like Snakeland and Snake Town could be seen as pejoratives to Slytherins and treated accordingly, so they insisted that Bart refer to his house as Slytherin at all times. Daphne interceded by suggesting that Bart avoid students who were suspected to be scions of former Voldemort operatives or their sympathizers, because they might have him harmed or even murdered on account of being a Muggleborn. They suspected these children to not only be Draco and his posse, but also enigmas like Theo Knott. Bart was surprised at this. Theo had been outright complimentary towards him that morning. "So how do you girls know all this stuff about Slytherin?" asked Bart. "You've only been here for a day." "Because our parents were in Slytherin and so they spoke to us about what being a Slytherin was like," came Daphne's reply, to which Tracy nodded in agreement. Bart, who with a shock realized the potential consequences if he failed to heed their advice, nodded and went against his natural inclinations by actually putting quill to parchment and recording this information. He then asked about their families and how they operated compared to regular Muggles. He soon discovered that both girls were unwilling to reveal much about their families, merely providing widely known information, such as their parents' occupations and siblings. Daphne's father, Cyrus, sat on the Wisengamot whereas her mother, Roxanne, was an obliviator. Tracy was an only child whereas Daphne had a younger sister named Astoria. Tracy did not mention her mother at all, which piqued Bart's interest, but she ignored his attempts to probe further. They concluded by setting another meeting for some time down the track. Bart realized their game. They were only willing to slowly release information to Bart over a long period of time. When Bart asked why, Daphne merely answered in her eloquent but enigmatic way, "Simpson, you must understand that everybody in Slytherin has an agenda. That agenda often does not favor Tracy or me. If somebody close to you invaded your mind, at least you wouldn't give away much about us that this person could use against us. So what's your agenda, then?" Bart pointedly asked. Daphne responded with a small smile, "You will discover that in time, Simpson. We are not Gryffindors, we do not reveal all our intentions or thoughts at once, or without thinking." Could have told Drainy that, Bart thought bitterly, not appreciating Daphne's evasive answer. "I'm sure that you were cunning and resourceful back in Muggle America, Simpson, but being cunning and resourceful in Slytherin means something else entirely. You really need to be more subtle and thoughtful about the way you act and talk when in Slytherin," Daphne finished. Bart then bade farewell to them, but was trying to comprehend Daphne's words on the way out. Somebody close to me, does she mean Gemma? What agenda could she have? What can she do that he hasn't yet told me about? Daphne and Tracy saw Bart pondering Daphne's words as he left. They gave each other imperceptible smirks, knowing that they had planted a seed of doubt in Bart's mind about Gemma, and that he couldn't inform the calculating prefect as to why he had that seed. Some hours later, Bart trooped into the Slytherin common room after eating another delicious dinner. Immediately, he realized that something was wrong. The common room should not have been completely deserted at this hour. Before he could react, however, the words, "Petrificus totalis," rang out from in front of him and Bart fell on his back, as rigid as a board. It was then that 10 fellow Slytherins revealed themselves and rushed Bart, punching and kicking him until he was bloodied, bruised and broken. As he took the blows, he realized that he had never felt so helpless in his life. Jimbo, Dolph and Kearney's attacks felt like tickles next to this unrelenting bombardment of pain, and at least with the former trio he had a chance to escape. Not this time. The physical assault had ended soon enough, with an older blonde student yelling, "That's for defiling Slytherin house with your presence, mud blood," as Bart's assailants backed off. Unfortunately, that was not the end of the verbal assault, as Draco smugly strode forward, placed his shoe on Bart's chest and pressed down, sending a shiver of pain through Bart's paralyzed body. Draco looked down at Bart, smiling sadistically at Bart's pain. "Serves Simpson right for being a mudblood upstart. It's good to see that so many Slytherins agree with me, it made it so much easier to attack the little git. I will eat Merlin's beard before I let Slytherin be stained by mudblood filth." Draco then decided to talk Bart down, after which he talked himself up like he so often did. "Whatever you were in your little dump in America, Simpson, at Hogwarts you are nothing more than a filthy mudblood. You are not fit to be a Slytherin. If you embarrass me the way that you did in Charms and Transfiguration today, Simpson, I will beat you up until you get the message that I am better than you in every way. Don't think that Farley can help you, either, while she's in Slytherin she dances to my tune." With that, Draco kicked Bart in the head, making his world go black. When Bart finally came to, he found himself in yet another infirmary. As the infirmary appeared to be covered in what was gradually but inexorably creeping sunlight, Bart deduced that it must still be early in the morning. 2 first days, 2 infirmaries. Just my luck, Bart thought ruefully to himself, as the memory of his expulsion from Ilvermorny haunted him once again. At least there don't seem to be any teachers waiting to expel me this time. Just to make sure, he tried turning his head. He succeeded but found that doing so sent him into a world of hurt that sent the memories of the rather brutal previous evening rushing through Bart's mind like a freight train. The sight he saw was one for sore eyes, however. It was Gemma, asleep on a chair. In Bart's eyes, she looked as pretty as ever, with not one strand of her wavy brunette hair out of place, nor any blemishes on her perfect porcelain skin. Bart's groan after turning her head caused her eyes to open, before she turned towards Bart and looked at him like he was the bloody Baron, Slytherin's BLD-stained, taciturn ghost. She then broke into a weak half-smile. For Bart, that expression signaled her distress, because typically she gave Bart one of those stunning Cheshire cat smiles that had been honed by years of practice schmoozing people. "You're awake. How do you feel?" asked Gemma. "Like I just went 50 rounds with Derek Tatum," instinctively responded Bart. Seeing Gemma's perplexed frown, he winced and thought, "Oh CRP, that's right. Daphne and Tracy told me not to mention anything nomage in front of the other Slytherins." "Speaking of which," Gemma began. Yeah, I know. No talking about Muggle stuff or Muggles in front of Slytherins." Gemma looked surprised, as if she didn't expect Bart to correctly finish her sentence. "I need to change the subject just in case she asks me how I guessed what she was going to say," Bart thought frantically. "So Gemma, why are you still here? Why do you care about me that much? How did you even find me?" Gemma considered her response briefly, not wanting to reveal too much of her plan for Bart, before replying, "Bart, I'm a prefect. I have to care about younger Slytherins. Besides, as I said, I love the idea of nurturing a great talent like yourself. To do that, I need to make sure you recover from any attack." Bart wasn't entirely convinced by her response, but his infatuation for Gemma led him to set his misgivings aside. He nodded at Gemma, inviting her to continue, to her relief. "After I finished my prefect duties, I came into the common room and tripped over what turned out to be your disillusioned body. I performed a quick hominum revelio, a spell that reveals people within a certain area," she clarified after seeing Bart's quizzical countenance, "and then found you." "Merlin's beard, Bart, what happened? Didn't you use those spells I taught you about?" Seeing Gemma's cross expression, Bart hastily clarified the situation. "They were hidden. They hit me with a curse that made my body freeze up and then I fell over, then they punched and kicked me when I was down. Then Drain Boy came up and threatened me before knocking me out. He said that you couldn't stop him and that I should expect to be beaten up some more if I showed him up in class again." Hearing this made Gemma seethe, making Bart wish that Draco was with him so that he could receive the bitter medicine Gemma looked ready to dole out. "That little bstrd, she growled. She then considered her options. The Malfoys were politically more powerful than the Farleys due to their greater wealth, so Gemma could not use her family's political influence to bring Draco's father down and diminish Draco's hold over the other Slytherins, nor could she really bribe Slytherins who openly sided with Draco against Gemma and Bart. No, in her mind, the best way to proceed was to figure out exactly who had attacked Bart, besides Draco. There were two possible ways of doing this, by using Veritaserum or Legilimency, respectively. Although he treated her relatively favorably due to her being a top student in his potions classes, Gemma nonetheless found her head of house, Professor Snape, to be at best taciturn and at worst unpleasant to talk with. He also doubted that he would simply give her a restricted substance like Veritaserum, even if she explained her reasons. It would also take her too long to try and brew. No, she would have to attempt Legilimency. Unfortunately, she wasn't particularly proficient at the practice. She had rarely received more than scattered, random memories whenever she tried it on her father, and she had been learning since third year, to try and probe the minds of Slytherin students who might want to harm or harass her and avoid them accordingly. She was more accomplished in occlumency, in which she had received lessons from her father since she was in her third year, not just because they feared Voldemort's return, but because some older boys from Slytherin, less than pleasant ones at that, expressed both romantic and SXL interest in her. She needed to be able to shut them down without losing control of herself and thus displaying weakness for them to prey upon. Gemma also practiced occlumency regularly when attending pure BLD events, shutting down negative emotions. Since these emotions were not disrupting her thought processes, this enabled her to appear calm, polite and professional underneath her dazzling smile. A few potioneers in fact, were impressed by Gemma's manner and decided to enter into business with the family apothecary. Bart was a prodigious talent, but he was also an excitable, expressive Muggleborn, and those typically weren't resistant to Legilimency of any kind. Now all she had to do was have him open his mind up to her, necessitating his trust. Luckily, the matron Poppy Pomfrey concluded that Bart was free to leave, at which point, rather than going to the feast, Gemma led them both towards the Hogwarts kitchens. After all, Bart needed to have a full stomach before she entered into his mind. "Gemma, do you even know where we're going?" Bart asked with bemusement, to which Gemma responded with an amused snort. "Bart, I'm a prefect, remember? I'm meant to know my way around the castle. Anyway, in my younger years at Hogwarts, a Slytherin student served detention down in Hogwarts kitchens. I don't remember what his name was. But he told the rest of my grade where we could go if we wanted free food at any time, including how to enter the kitchens. Most of my fellow students laughed at him because they see house elves as nothing more than beasts of burden and so don't want to even see them, much less be around them for long. I have nothing against house elves. My house elves have always been faithful, loyal servants. They're only unpleasant if you abuse them." "Do they get paid?" "No, of course not. They just enjoy serving their MSTR, Gemma responded with consternation. Lisa would have reacted very angrily at this revelation and to be honest Bart wouldn't have blamed her. It reminded Bart of slavery, which he knew to be wrong. "Bart, what's wrong?" a perplexed Gemma asked. "See, in Muggle America, the houses that have servants actually pay them. So it seems that there's a cultural clash between the Muggle and Wizarding worlds going on. No, house elves get insulted if you try to pay them. To them, bonding to a family and doing work is payment enough. Different different wand swishes for different folks, huh?" leaving Gemma utterly flummoxed. "Oh DMN, that's right, no more Muggle talk. I guess that pay is rewarding in some cultures and insulting in others. Like you said, there's a cultural difference. It's not bad or good. It just is," Bart rationalized. "Very good, Bart. By the way, in higher wizarding circles you should not use the word DMN. It is seen as low class. Also, be very careful of associating with any Gryffindors. We might not be so different than them in some ways, but our rivalry is so intense that openly associating with any of them will see you branded a traitor to Slytherin house and then brutally attacked the way you were last night." At that prospect, Bart winced as if he was staring straight into the sun. "What about Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs?" "Ravenclaws are mostly okay. Hufflepuffs and Slytherins don't have a formal rivalry, but their mindset is very different from ours and we don't relate to each other very much. I would be very selective regarding whom you talk to in that house. If you talk to a Muggleborn as a fellow Muggleborn, then Slytherins will assume that you are working with other Muggleborns to undermine Slytherin. Really stupid, but that's the mindset that you will have to deal with in Slytherin." Bart rolled his eyes contemptuously at that reasoning, but let Gemma continue. "There are also other reasons to be careful about interacting with students from outside of Slytherin. How familiar are you with Professor Dumbledore?" "Headmaster Dumbledore. He came to my house and took me to Diagon Alley to get my stuff, then came and took me to King's Cross Station," Bart explained. Gemma cursed inwardly as she realized that the wizened wizard was already aware of Bart's talents. She had no doubt he was planning to keep an eye on Bart throughout his time at Hogwarts. No doubt he thought that he could mold him into somebody who could take care of any threats to the aged mage. After all, Gemma planned to use Bart for much the same reasons. "What do you think of him?" Gemma innocently asked. "He seemed nice enough, but I don't trust authority figures or teachers very much. My kindergarten teacher made sure of that. Besides, I was born a rebel and I'll die a rebel, baby," Bart answered flirtatiously. Gemma giggled outwardly but inwardly she felt like doing a jig, realizing that Bart was most unlikely to choose Professor Dumbledore's interests over Gemma's should they inevitably collide. Now to make sure that Bart didn't ally himself with the meddlesome professor. "Bart, do you know why Dumbledore came to collect you?" "He just said that I was a really gifted wizard," came Bart's concise response. Sighing, Gemma explained, "Bart, Dumbledore wants to spy on you and bring you around to his way of thinking. Then he'll use you against whatever opponent he's fighting against. Listen, in my pure BLD wizarding circles." "By pure BLD do you mean all wizards?" "Yes, now please listen. In these circles you hear things about other wizards, and that includes Dumbledore. I heard that, in his youth, he had been planning to not only dominate the wizarding world, but also the entire world, enslaving muggles like your parents and having wizards like Dumbledore rule over them. He apparently used many wizards to try and achieve these goals, Gemma explained. Bart looked absolutely mortified. He might not like authority figures as a matter of principle, but he was seriously struggling to connect the kindly headmaster that he had met with the megalomaniac that Gemma had just described. So how come he hasn't been executed or jailed for life? Bart stuttered as he asked. Simple. He was originally working in concert with a Dark Lord, Gellert Grindelwald. Think of Grindelwald as being like the Voldemort of his time, Gemma continued, not wanting to utter Voldemort's name. However, it became apparent to Dumbledore that Grindelwald, rather than jointly ruling the world with Dumbledore, merely wanted to use Dumbledore to achieve world domination and then dispose of him. Dumbledore couldn't have that, so he defeated Grindelwald in battle and was hailed as a hero. Over the years, he's become so influential, popular and powerful, that anyone who tried to seriously expose his past would at best be shunned and reduced to poverty. At worst, well, I think you can guess. Besides, how can anyone say such bad things about such a kind man? Gemma rhetorically asked Bart with a cold smile. She smirked as she surveyed Bart's reaction of complete horror to her words, knowing there and then that she had hooked him like a fish. However, she had only told Bart part of the truth. She had heard rumors that Dumbledore sympathized with Grindelwald's longing for world domination, but not necessarily that he had seriously tried to help him dominate the planet, much less use countless wizards to achieve that goal. Nor had she heard stories about him doing anything nasty to any public detractors, much less disappearing them. That didn't matter to Gemma, though. All that mattered to her was molding Bart into a weapon that could help her to destroy and subjugate her enemies, and if compelling him to distrust Dumbledore was necessary to achieve that goal, then so be it. Anything to prevent her family from being placed in a compromising position again. Besides, what Bart didn't know wouldn't hurt him. So, which families or students should I look out for in Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff? Bart croaked. Well, in your year, these students' families have been reputed to be close to Dumbledore in some fashion: Padma Patil, Hannah Abbott, Susan Bones, Ernest Macmillan, Zacharias Smith, Anthony Goldstein and Terry Boot. Bones in particular, because her aunt tried to have my parents prosecuted for assisting Voldemort, Gemma replied venomously. Boot and Goldstein. They can't be related to Seraphines or Professor Goldstein, can they? Bart wondered, with those surnames rendering him near catatonic with shock. Did your family help him? My parents avoided prosecution for that very thing, so I would say not, Gemma replied, taking care not to provide Bart with too much detail, lest that affect his trust in her. Bart was so busy contemplating her reply that he didn't notice his foot sliding into a four-legged creature. Bart looked down and saw a scrawny, skeletal-like cat looking up at him with bulging yellow eyes. In a flash, she ran off. That's Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat. We need to disappear because Filch will be here in a moment, Gemma hissed. If she's Mrs. Norris, then who the hell is Mr. Norris? Filch? Bart querulously asked. Ignoring Bart's question, Gemma quickly and non-verbally disillusioned and silenced them both. A moment after she did, Mrs. Norris came back with Filch. Who's there, my SWEET? Filch screamed as his body moved itself bolt upright. Mrs. Norris looked at her MSTR in alarm, with Bart taking advantage of her being distracted to WHP a stink bomb out of his pocket, toss it up in the air and transfigure it into a rat. Mrs. Norris might have been an exceptionally intelligent cat, but a cat she still was. The scrawny creature bolted after the rat, with Filch limping behind her as he yelled, "Come back, my sweet." When they were both gone, Gemma removed the charms on both herself and Bart. Bart, that was absolutely brilliant. What did you do to Filch? She asked, shaking with laughter. Oh, I just gave him a wedgie to end all wedgies. It'll wear off in a bit, Bart answered nonchalantly as Gemma burst out laughing. They went down a staircase and into a stone basement corridor. Gemma tickled the pair on a painting depicting a bowl of fruit and, when a green door handle materialized, led Bart into the kitchens. Bart couldn't believe his eyes at what he saw, a multitude of tiny creatures with bat-like ears, bulging eyes and rags for clothes. "These are house elves?" Bart asked, agog, as they saw them and surrounded them. One tugged at his robe and asked him, "Does student want food?" After a moment, Bart replied, "Yes, students want food." In a flash, they were sat down at a table and given a sumptuous meal. "Talk about quick service," Bart quipped. However, they were not undisturbed during their meal, as a pair of stocky twins with distinct red hair and freckled features gambled into the room. When they saw Bart and Gemma, they stopped. "Well, well, well. Well, well, well," they both exclaimed in a rising pitch, to the point where their voices sounded like they were both castrati in a helium-infused room at the end of the last, "well." "If it isn't Slytherin's first Muggleborn student for at least 500,000 years, and Percy's fellow pestering prefect, Gemma Farley. What's Percy like to work with, little Miss Prefect? As insufferable as he is to live with?" "Every bit, Weasleys," Gemma noted sourly. "What are you even doing down here? Shouldn't you two be at the feast? We finished early and came down here to collect some goodies. Never thought I'd see Slytherins down here. They're all bullying gits who think that they're too good to deal with house elves, unless they're beating them," one of them jibed. Not rising to their bait, Gemma brusquely replied, "Well, hurry up, otherwise I'll give you a detention." "Oh, we wouldn't want that, Your Highness," came their rejoinder as they collected their sweets from the house elves before leaving. Unfortunately for Bart, Gemma heard his chuckling. "They're a real barrel of laughs, aren't they?" she asked coldly, daring him to say yes as he gazed into her burning brown eyes. Bart hesitated and noted, "I get the feeling that you don't really like them." "Well, they annoy their ponce of a brother, the one that caught us on the train, so they're not all bad, but they constantly harass Slytherins. They even turned my hair a rainbow color once," to which Bart tried not to snigger. These twins seem like pretty cool dudes, Bart thought, but as he was doing so Gemma's hand suddenly took his wrist as she whisked him out of the kitchens, took him into the stone corridor, transfigured a couple of chairs using a couple of nuts and made him sit. "Now Bart, I am going to find out who attacked you, besides Malfoy, so I can punish them accordingly. To do that, I am going to have to join your mind to mine so I can see actually what happened," Gemma explained. "What, you mean like mind reading?" Bart asked, recalling that time at Ollivander's, when Headmaster Dumbledore had previously probed his mind. At this, Gemma sighed before explaining herself. "No Bart, the mind is not like a book. I mean, I can't start at page 1, or the first day of your life and proceed chronologically from there. My experience with legilimency is that you have to navigate the mind and search for certain feelings or memories. In the case of other Slytherins, I was searching for feelings or memories that indicated a longing to harm or harass me in some way. So basically, you have to try and think about the incident as best as you can after I cast the spell. The process might be uncomfortable, but it is the best way to let me help you so we can get this whole business over and done with," Gemma finished. Bart nodded, relaxed and focused upon that memory before Gemma looked him in the eyes, cocked her wand towards him like a pistol, and uttered, "Legilimens." The resultant sensation was not painless, like when Dumbledore probed his mind. Indeed, it forced Bart's head back as he gasped in pain and shock, with the memory of the incident flittering before his eyes like a motion picture on fast forward. The sensation soon ceased as quickly as it began and Bart's head lurched forward. Gemma touched his left shoulder and tenderly asked, "Are you okay?" Bart felt like firing back an insult, but held his tongue and merely uttered flatly, "Yeah, fine. Who else can do that? I mean, besides Dumbledore?" Gemma responded, "The other teachers might be able to do it, so don't look them in the eyes." On another note, Gemma said with a warm thin-lipped smile, "I've managed to identify your attackers. The blonde who called you a mudblood was Lucian Bowl, a beater on Slytherin's Quidditch team. I doubt that the Quidditch captain, Marcus Flint, sanctioned Bowl's involvement in this attack. He might be a thug, but he's also a fifth year, so he knows that I have been protecting you and that I would magically eviscerate any fifth-year Slytherin who acted against my interests. Remember, in Slytherin, power means strength, and I'm one of the most powerful witches in the school. As for the 6th and 7th years, they're too preoccupied by their upcoming final exams, or NEWTS, to worry about feuds between first years, even influential ones like Malfoy. I think that Bull participated because he has all the brainpower of a particularly inbred troll. At this crack, Bart chuckled, before Gemma continued. 2 other participants are named Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle, you might know them as Malfoy's Dunderhead associates. Merlin knows why they became Slytherins, they're more like thuggish Hufflepuffs. The rest were all 4th years and below, so younger than me. What are you going to do to them? Well, let's just say that when I get my hands on them, they will be serving quite a few nighttime detentions, with Malfoy's going on top of his existing ones. Plus they'll all mysteriously come down with some rather searing gas pain at the same time I give them detentions. Gemma nastily chortled as she winked at Bart, to which Bart smiled evilly, before she continued. However, I do recommend learning the hominum revelio, or human revealing, charm so you can scope around corners in the Slytherin common room or dormitories, just in case somebody else wants to attack you, she advised, quickly showing Bart the charm. Showing his adaptability and resourcefulness, Bart mastered it in mere minutes. The second, more permanent method of dealing with this problem is to challenge Draco to a wizard's duel, Gemma explained after successfully tutoring Bart. You mean fight him with magic? Yes. There is a place called the Slytherin Dueling Dungeon which helps to resolve disputes and power struggles between fellow Slytherins. Both prestige and respect are on the line. Should Malfoy lose, the older students might not join your side on account of you being a Muggleborn, or approve if the other first years sit with you, but they will stop doing his bidding on account that he isn't a respectable enough wizard, even with Lucius' influence. We'll have it on the second Sunday from now, at 12 p.m., as per Slytherin tradition. I'll also place a notice on the notice board while you tell the rest of the first years, Gemma explained. Let me guess, you'll teach me a few curses in that time while Drakey Wakey is too busy serving detention to learn anything. Who said Slytherins had to fight fair, huh? Bart slyly noted, to which Gemma gave him a knowing smirk. Well, somebody has to teach you. I don't think that gibbering fool Quirrell will. From what I saw of him yesterday, he stutters so much that he can barely form complete sentences, much less teach anything, Gemma sneered. Bart was accustomed to dealing with incompetent teachers and, hearing Gemma's description of the man, smirked, as in Professor Quirrell he saw a mark that could easily be thrown off guard. Speak of the devil, looks like I have defense against the dark arts next, Bart remarked. Wonderful. I should make sure you get there, being a prefect and all. We will meet in the Slytherin common room at 8 p.m. tomorrow and then we will walk to the correct room together. Be there, she warned as she walked Bart to his defense against the dark arts class. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Rick89 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.